Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight's live town hall meeting hosted by Douglas County. We'd like to welcome all of you who showed up in person. Thanks for being here. And the dozens of you already joining online and on the phone. Did you know that nearly half of Douglas County is public or protected land? These preservation efforts are quite intentional. It's taken the work of partners, the support of our citizens who voted in the 1994 election to support our open spaces, parks, and trails with a dedicated sales and use tax. I came to Douglas County after I left the Army and initially lived for just under a year up in Castle Pines before settling here in Castle Rock. And I'll tell you, I remember a conversation with my neighbor in Castle Rock that told me about the horrendous waste of money that the town of Castle Rock was putting into a place called Butterfield Park. Now, I'm seeing some reactions here in the audience. And so some of you know Butterfield Park, right? It's been there for over 20 years, and it's become a real valued asset in the town of Castle Rock. When we get outside of Castle Rock and we do look at the open spaces that have been preserved, we know that they're being used. We know that people value them. And so tonight, we're here to talk about the open space sales tax that has actually made a lot of these acquisitions and a lot of this park development possible. That dedicated tax sunsets in 2024. As we consider placing an extension on November's ballot, well, we want to hear from you. If you're joining us on the phone, press *3 on your telephone keypad to ask a question. For those online, please submit your questions and our moderator will read it out loud. For those of you with us in the room, we're going to come a time, just raise your hand. And we'll bring you the microphone so that everyone in the room, online or on the phone, can hear your question. We have had town halls where folks wanted to have the discussion from their seat without a microphone. It's a one-way conversation, so we'll bring that microphone to you. Commissioner Thomas, take us in from here.
Thank you, Commissioner Teal. I'd like to thank everybody for being here in the room tonight and everybody online. I think the last time we had one of these town halls, there were 1,700 people online. So a lot of people are paying attention to what their county government is doing. As part of the original ballot language, an oversight committee has been invaluable for providing perspective and accountability for every dollar of this tax money. The committee includes members from municipalities, one person from our Douglas County Planning Commission, one citizen with a background in land planning, and one person at large. We've also had very supportive partners. Since 1994, this dedicated funding has helped protect over 63,000 acres, much of that in partnership with Colorado Parks and Wildlife and Great Outdoors Colorado. In fact, various partners have contributed about $2.92 for every dollar of open space sales and use tax spent. So leveraging and partnership have been very successful in how we have spent these tax dollars. I'd like to thank the dedicated members of the Open Space, it's the County Open Space Advisory Committee, and all of our partners that have helped us in these preservation efforts. It's also important to note that this tax has been a sales tax. It's not a property tax. So everyone who shops and dines in Douglas County contributes to our beautiful parks, trails, and open spaces. I'm the only commissioner still serving on the board that was part of the 3 that voted to acquire Sandstone Ranch. And I remember getting Thank you. I remember getting kind of a quick call from Doug DeBoard, the county manager, saying, we have this opportunity and we need to act on it quickly. And Roger Partridge and Dave Weaver and I took a trip up to Sandstone. And one of my favorite pictures from being a commissioner is standing on that suspension bridge with Dave and Roger. That is such a cool picture. I keep thinking that needs to be in the ranch house at Sandstone because that's where it all began. And Douglas County is a very conservative county in the way it spends its money. And so we were able to scrape together $18.5 million in 42 days to buy the ranch. Eventually, we got money from 2 different partners, and it brought the cost down to $9 million. But originally, we had to have $18.5 million in cash in 42 days to do that. And so I'm kind of a skinflake when it comes to spending your tax dollars. And so as this moves forward, you're going to hear me saying that I'm concerned about a 20-year extension on this tax. So just know you're going to hear that from me, because when we budget conservatively, we can do good things with your money. So I think 10 years is the good length for this extension. So stay tuned. We need your feedback. And Roger, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, commissioners. Again, we want to get to your questions tonight. So if you're on the phone and want to ask a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad, and you'll be transferred to an operator who will take down some basic information. Once the operator notes your information, you can listen to the call until it's your turn. Since we'd like to hear from as many people as possible, we'll ask all speakers to limit themselves to 1 question. When it's your turn, I'll call your name, or if you're here in the audience, the commissioner will hand you the microphone. Please keep your comments brief so that we can get to as many as possible. If you're online, you can enter your question just below the viewer window. So, and then one other reminder again, if you are here in the hearing room, please make sure you have the microphone so everyone can hear your comment or question. So let's get started. Commissioner Teal.
Well, thank you, Roger. So the idea behind tonight, we're talking about extending this open space sales tax that has existed here since 1994. It does expire in 2024, and there are a couple ways that this extension can be done. This is an extension that your county commissioners, we can do it as a staff product and extend it from the dais. But what we have before us this year is an opportunity brought before us by a group of citizens, just like all of you. As a matter of fact, I look around the audience tonight and I see a number of folks that were very involved in bringing this initiative before the commissioners. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, this citizens initiative that was brought before the commissioners. And we have on the panelists tonight several members of that citizens group. Starting right to left, I hope I get this right, Jay Sage, County Open Space Advisory Committee. Jay, give a wave, please. We got Jennifer Drybread, Douglas County Open Space Initiative. And then Mickey Clark, the chair of the Douglas County Open Space Initiative. Also joining us up here to my immediate right, Mr. Dan Dirtz, the Assistant Director of Open Space for Douglas County. Brittany Castle, the Curator for Douglas County. And then finally, Steve Schultz, Assistant Director of Parks and Trails for Douglas County. And then, of course, as I'm sure many of you know, myself, George Teal, and then on the other side of the panel, my colleague, Commissioner Laura Thomas. Go ahead. I'd like to go ahead and just remind everybody, if you have a question and you're joining us on phone, please press *3 to be put into the queue so you can ask your question. The first question we have this evening is a question that came to us earlier online from Sarah. And Sarah asks, is this a new tax and what would it fund? Mickey, I wonder if you could start that off for us by answering that question.
Yes, thank you very much. No, that's a short answer. It's not a new tax. It's just an extension of the 1994 tax. So just a little bit of background on that. I'm the current president of the Douglas County Open Space Initiative, and I was the president, yes, I'm going to have to admit this publicly, 28 years ago in the 1994 campaign as well. And I will tell you, it's been a journey about a legacy for Douglas County. You see people up here, Jay, 26 years on COSAC, Jennifer, ran the last campaign with me as well, and several other people out here. I could point out a few of them in the audience. We're about building something that's going to go on into the future. So to answer more specifically, Commissioner Teal, this tax, the sales and use tax will provide, it's 1/6 of a cent. It will provide funding for parks, trails, and open space. Any more, or is that enough? Because Jennifer can go into great detail about this.
But by all means, Jennifer, can you help answer that question as well from Sarah?
Be glad to. The funding for parks, trails, and open space have extended, will build on the incredible achievements since the program's inception. It will continue to build on our system of outstanding public parks for our residents and provide for recreational needs for our growing population. It will continue to build on the network of trails. It will continue to conserve open space lands for wildlife habitats, conserve lands along streams and lakes that also help to protect water quality, conserve lands that act as buffers between communities, help conserve our working farms and ranches, preserve scenic views and landmarks, and maintain and conserve historic preservation sites. The Douglas County Open Space Initiative, we're proposing a simpler, more transparent, and we believe a more effective allocation of funds from the current program than we designed in '94. We propose an allocation of 22% of the funds for parks, which turns out to be, in our calculation, about almost $1 million more than what Parks is getting now under the current program. We propose to allocate 30% for trails and open space acquisitions. And while tens of thousands of acres have been conserved, at present, there is no specific allocation in the resolution for the acquisition of open space, and we feel that's very important to have that. We propose to allocate 20% for municipal sharebacks for parks, trails, and open space, and importantly, bring in the cities of Lone Tree and Castle Pines. And the municipal sharebacks account would receive about $500,000 more under our proposal than at present. And we propose to allocate 28% for maintenance, operations, and capital improvements for open space lands. More funding is made available under our proposal without increasing taxes, important to make that point, largely because there is no budget in our proposal for bonding. If that were to occur at some point in the future, that would have to go back to the voters of Douglas County to make that authorization. If the sales and use tax is allowed to sunset next year, 100% of the funding for open space acquisitions will go away, and with it, funding for maintenance of the county's 17,000 acres of open space held in fee ownership. We will also not be able to take advantage of entering into partnerships to acquire open space properties that Commissioner Thomas talked about, like in the example of the Sandstone Ranch, very successful. The municipal sharebacks for parks, trails, and open space will also end if the program is not extended. And then finally, approximately 32% of our parks funding will cease to exist. And for all these reasons, not extending the sunset will have a detrimental effect on the quality of life for Douglas County residents. Our goal is for the Douglas County Board of County Commissioners to place this proposal for a 20-year extension of the funding for parks, trails, and open space on the ballot this November and let the Douglas County voters decide. Thank you.
So Jay, 20 years on the Open Space Citizens Committee that we've had, how can you add a little bit extra to the answers we've already received for Sarah's question?
Thank you, Commissioner Teal. So I'm Jay Sage. I live in Highlands Ranch. It's nice to see so many smiling faces out in the audience. I've been a volunteer for the Open Space Program for 26 years. For the past 5 years, I and audience member Brian O'Malley have been part of a citizens group that spoke to service clubs about the value of open space. So I've seen and I've proudly seen the acquisition and conservation of all 74 of our properties. And I'm going to kind of allude to what Commissioner Thomas talked about. There's a power of open space. There's a power, I can feel it in the room now. It's a power since people realize open space preserves and protects water, wildlife, and our way of life. And it's a way to protect our environment while improving our quality of life. It's very easy to get people together from diverse groups for a common goal of protecting open space. So Commissioner Thomas had a wonderful story about Sandstone Ranch. Years ago, my story is I was at a meeting and a person came to our group and said, I'd like to preserve 20,000 acres and it's going to cost $70 million. Well, the budget at that time in the late 90s was less than $4 million in sales tax. So I'm not an accountant, but it didn't make sense to me. But that's the power of open space, because Greenland Ranch, and the person I'm talking about, hopefully she's online, is Sydney Macy. That was preserved. 20,000 acres, just over 20,000 acres, $76 million deal. The portion of the county payment was only $10 million. So that's the power of open space, and I'd like to talk about that a little bit more as we get into questions.
Well, thank you, Jay. So just to follow up on Sarah's question, thank you, members of the Citizens Committee. But I'd like to turn to staff now to get us some of the facts on what the sales tax has actually funded since 1994. And Steve, I know you can give us a good perspective and some of the details from the Parks Department.
Thank you, Commissioner. Since 1994, these funds have gone to maintaining and expanding parks. A lot of that expansion is happened within the boundaries that we've had dedicated to us through the land development process, but includes things like playgrounds, synthetic fields, which also help us conserve water, adding additional trails and things like that through Douglas County. We've also been able to contribute these dollars to partnerships that we participate in, including building out capital improvement out at Reuter Hess Recreation Authority out there. So these dollars have touched a lot of different areas of the county. And I can't point out how important these are to our maintenance. A lot of these go to maintenance and aging infrastructure, playgrounds, irrigation systems, things like that are going to break down over time. And these are very important to keep that going forward so that we're conserving water and doing the best we can with resources throughout the county.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Dan, from the perspective of the Open Space Department, how have these sales tax dollars been used?
Thank you, Commissioner. Open Space has used much of the money that has been put into the Open Space Sales Tax Fund to acquire lands. Since 1995, the county, through either ownership or protected area, conservation areas, has been able to protect about 64,000 acres of land, which equates to about 100 square miles. The county's 843 square miles, for your information. We've been able to do that at a cost. The total cost of that property would have been about $227 million had we paid for that on our own. Again, through our partners, our cost to that has only been about $78 million. So we have been able to leverage dollars and be able to get the biggest bang for the taxpayers' dollars on that through our partnerships. In addition to acquiring land, we have to maintain those properties as well. And throughout the years, we've found various ways to maintain those properties, and we spent much of those dollars on maintenance. And in addition, we've been able to acquire land such as we've talked about Sandstone, the Spring Valley School, which Brittany can talk to a little bit about how we deal with historic preservation, and other various properties that so many of our citizens enjoy. So that is what we've done from an open space perspective. And you want to talk about historic preservation?
Sure, yeah. With historic preservation, the county owns several structures, and over time they do deteriorate. So we put a lot of time and maintenance into these structures. These funds really help fund the projects. We go for state historic fund grants, which they fund 75%, and the open space funds help match 25% of the projects. We currently have 3 projects going on right now that the open space sales tax is helping fund currently.
Thank you, Brittany. Roger, we've been on the phone for a while. I bet you have a phone question for us.
We do indeed. Let's hear from Ed first. Ed, go ahead. Hello, Ed, you are live. Go ahead with your question. No, Ed just hung up. Let's hear from Kevin next. Kevin, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kevin. I'm here today to talk about the importance of open space for individuals with disabilities. I work personally in adaptive recreation and have seen firsthand the positive effect outdoor activities can have on this population. I work at Adams Camp in Fraser Valley every summer. This is a summer camp dedicated to individuals with cognitive disabilities such as cerebral palsy, autism, and Down syndrome. We work on independence in outdoor scenarios such as ziplining, orienteering, and rafting on the Colorado River. I often hear from clients that these intense activities are their favorite part of camp and see them overcome deep fears in the process. This camp is a week that all of our clients look forward to across the entire year, and every time they leave as more confident, strong, and independent people than before. I'd really just like to say to please support continued funding for Douglas County Open Space. Outdoor recreation on protected lands provides an unmatched setting for the betterment of all people. And my question, does Douglas County have any outdoor adaptive recreation programs suited for people with disabilities?
Thank you for that question. Currently, we do have a program that is being run out of Sandstone where we do have adaptive riding. I think that is a great idea and a way to move forward in terms of what we're doing with our open space lands. But certainly, it is something we have recognized as an important step forward for the county, is making sure that our properties are accessible to all.
Thank you, Kevin. Roger, did you have another phone question?
We do. Let's hear from Dan next. Dan, go right ahead.
My question is this: what would keep a future county government from selling or developing land acquired with the open space tax money?
So the question is, what would prevent the county from selling open space land that we have purchased? So when we buy a property like Sandstone Ranch, we work with another entity like Douglas County Land Conservancy or someone else to put a conservation easement on that so that those properties can never be sold. Thank you for that question.
I wonder if we can also turn to our citizen committee who brought forward this proposal to the commissioners, and whether Jennifer, Mickey, Jay, would one of you like to address how this question that we're looking to put on the ballot will address that question directly?
Thank you. This is Jennifer Drybread. And we drafted a resolution, a proposal for the county commissioners to look at and consider. And this issue came up. You know, we've had good county commissioners over the years where this hasn't been a problem. But we want to make sure that if it does at some point come a time where an open space property that was acquired by these funds comes to the foreground, that we actually put in our resolution that it would have to be noticed on the property, a sign, much like you see for rezoning applications. So not just posted in the paper, but actually signposted, and then that would require ultimately a decision by the Board of County Commissioners.
All right. Well, thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate you. Again, we have the current state that we're in right now, but I always want to be drawing it to this proposal brought to us by the Citizens Committee. Right off the bat, Roger, do we have a phone question?
We do. Let's hear from Maggie next. Maggie, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, commissioners, for hosting this meeting. And thank you to the members of the initiative and then also the member Jay of the advisory committee. I just wanted to give a comment. Basically, I'm highly for a ballot measure and for extending the funding sales tax for all the Douglas County open space. I've been an avid user of Spruce Mountain and Greenland and the Dawson Butte open spaces and recently Sandstone Ranch. And I'm just so appreciative of the beauty and the wildlife opportunities that are there and the recreation, and just am 100% for it and just wanted to put that comment forward. Thank you.
I have an anecdote, Maggie. As you're listening, Spruce Mountain, our development, our preserved lands, is called Spruce Mountain, but there's only one spruce tree on the whole property. So we cannot call it Spruce Mountains, appropriately called Spruce Mountain.
Our next, we did get a question online, and this one came in from Andrea. Are there other ways of funding open space parks and trails than extending the sales tax? Dan, Steve, would one of you like to take that one, please?
Thank you, Commissioner. There are other ways to look at funding this, although this does play a huge role in what we do. You look at opportunities for grants. There's also a mechanism for parks through the parkland dedication through development. So those are kind of the vehicles that we end up looking at. If we want to look at ways to extend our dollars, there's always grants that we can apply for, including Great Outdoors Colorado grants. A lot of our technology that we put into the parks and improvements that we look to we go out for those grants. So yes, there are other ways that we can do that, but this does play a huge role in what we do.
And from an open space perspective, we talked about the leveraging of dollars, and we've certainly been able to do a great job of that. But really what it would mean for us would be competing for dollars in the general fund. And, you know, to be able to leverage those dollars like we have been able to, we'd be looking at funding through general fund dollars at that point in conjunction with those partnerships that we've established.
Okay, well, thank you, Dan. Thanks, Steve. Commissioner Thomas, it looks like we got a couple of questions in the room. You want to take it?
We do. And as I'm walking to get a question from the room, I just remind everybody, if you want to call in, press *3 on your keypad, and you can be next online to ask a question. So this gentleman has raised his hand for a question.
Let me, can I hold it, please?
No, I'm going to hold it.
Okay.
We'll do it together.
Okay. So my name is Peter Smith. I'm a resident of Keene Ranch. I am a conservationist. We conserved our property and we live next door to the Dawson Butte open space. I have many years on the board of directors for Douglas Land Conservancy, including past president. I support open space and parks, but I'm opposed to this tax. So listen up, I'm not opposed to the spending. I'm for continued funding for the parks and open space from the general fund through the normal budget process. If you think about it, our national parks are not funded through a special tax. They are funded through the normal allocations from Congress. In general, special interest taxes remove decision-making power from elected officials like George and Laura. They run for a long time and are subject to overfunding and abuse. As an example is the current Justice Center tax, where Sheriff Spurlock built a racetrack with double thickness pavement and a crime lab where DC paid much more than their share based on population and crime rates. He was able to do so as he had the money from a tax that outlived his purpose and usefulness. Our Justice Center is a Taj Mahal, yet we continue to pay the tax. Excuse me, taxes should be available for any purpose our elected officials deem necessary at the time. Imagine if we have a larger pandemic or a repeat of the 1965 flood. Even worse, heaven forbid, but imagine if we had a Louisville Superior type wildfire in Highlands Ranch. It would be better to have the flexibility of a general fund versus money locked away. Okay, now to this specific issue. I've read the proposed ballot issue, and it's not the 6 lines you see. There's much more to it than that. First of all, it's proposed to be for 20 years and ties the hands of future elected officials and administrators. Nobody is capable of predicting 10 years, much less 20. Let's make this sunset in 4 to 8 years, similar to what the state does. The municipal sharing feature is ill-defined, and it would be preferable to share taxes based solely on population consistent with spending that generates the tax receipts. Currently, the allocation in the proposal is up to 30% for acquisition. I assume that's acquisition of new properties, up to 28% for operations and maintenance, up to 22% for administration and construction, up to 20% for municipal shareback. Predicting this specifically is fraught with danger, as the future is full of doubt. It also shows a lack of respect and confidence for future elected officials and staff. This is a common fault of elected officials who think they have all the answers today for the problems of tomorrow. If future folks perform badly, you can remove them. It is better to have the flexibility for unforeseen circumstances, such as a large wildfire. So my question is, I would prefer a ballot that says, without increasing taxes, shall the existing Douglas County sales and use tax of 1.7% for parks and trails be converted to benefit the general fund to allow for future flexibility. In other words, I'm not advocating that we reduce the tax. Our taxes are very reasonable in Douglas County. But what I'm advocating for is that we let our elected officials do this as we anticipated in the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Is there another question in the hearing room while I'm standing out here?
Commissioner, I think we had one here and one there. Just as a reminder for those folks here in the
Your question
hearing
is
room,
if,
My question is, would the board be willing to change the language of this tax to make it, to put it back in the general fund? So we would have flexibility.
so I think George and I are going to be at some work sessions between now and when we put this on the ballot on August 23rd, and there's going to be plenty of time to discuss that. As one, go ahead, George.
Yeah, Commissioner, I mean, I think that's a really valid set of questions right there. And so since we're talking about a proposal brought to us by the Citizens Committee, Commissioner, I wonder if Mickey or Jay or Jennifer would like to address some of those points and give us a little bit of insight on why we see that on this proposal.
Well, those are good questions. And we have had a very fiscally conservative and prudent Board of County Commissioners. So I understand why you would like to refer this question to them. Let me tell you what our thinking was. First of all, we're talking about a legacy project. Open space is a legacy project. It's not a project that can be done in 3 to 4 years. Let me give you just a few examples. Jay mentioned Greenland Ranch. Well, Sidney Macy actually started that project 20 years before that. And it went away and it came back, and then it took 3 years to negotiate. So your 3 to 4 year timeline, we would never have Greenland Ranch. We would never have a lot of ranches. Dawson Butte came up unexpectedly, very unexpectedly. These things happen, and people that decide that they're going to, you mentioned Keene Ranch, that they decide that they're going to donate their ranch, they may be talking years in the future. They can't predict that 20 years from now, the county commissioners are going to think that Greenland Ranch is a good idea. When I talk about a legacy, think about what would New York City be without Central Park? Do you think that every 3 years, if it had to be voted for funding, that we would have that kind of thing? No, I'm sorry, I don't. But if I'm missing your question, let me address it. What you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is let the county commissioners at the time and don't have an ongoing source of funding, correct? Let the county commissioners take it out of general funds at whatever time any of these things come up and don't have a source of funding. Is that?
If we can move on from this one, we can have a conversation with the two of you and answer your question. But in the meantime, we're going to start losing people off the phone if we don't move along. So we'll get back to you, Pete. Is there a question over here?
We have one more back here. And just as a reminder, please keep your comments very brief. We've got several hundred people listening online and on the phone. So questions, but try to limit comments.
Good evening, commissioners and staff and audience. My name is Bea Weaver. I am a member of Douglas County Trail Ambassador Program, and I started in September of 20 in the pandemic. Okay, I said, oh, this is a wonderful opportunity to get out and talk to people. You know, I've been in limbo for 6 months. I have continued since then, and have seen a lot of different people come through and absolutely enjoy Sandstone, Spruce Mountain, Dawson Butte, and many other open spaces, especially hikers, bikers, birders, and horseback riders, and naturalists, and conservationists, but especially those who bring families, children, mother-in-laws, whatever. And most recently, I had an opportunity to.
And your question?
Yeah, no, it was a comment.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Most recently, I had an opportunity to see 2 young children come through Spruce Mountain last Sunday. Tiny children, 3 to 5 years old, and they were trotting along with their parents. So I want to tell you that this program has a big impact, not only on us adults, but also on these children who will be the adults of the future and the residents of Douglas County in the future. So I think, personally, I hadn't heard of this issue, but I think we should have a long-term view, and I'm in favor of 20 years, frankly, because this is a legacy program. So thank you. I'll continue to pay 0.17% sales tax and enjoy every minute of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Teal.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that. Well, obviously, folks, those of you joining, those of you here in the room, we're having great questions so far. For those of you who may have just joined us, good evening, and thank you for joining tonight's live town hall about our open space sales and use tax. We're getting your feedback as we consider placing an extension, not an increase, of this tax, sales and use tax, on the November ballot. And Roger, I believe you said, I believe we have somebody with an online question.
We do indeed. This came in from Karen. Karen asked, what % of the sales tax revenue will be utilized to assist property owners in unincorporated Douglas County since we aren't part of the 20% shareback?
That's a really great question. Let's go. Mickey, I wonder if that's one that you, Jennifer, or Jay could take in terms of what this proposal, how that would handle the question that we heard.
So 30% of the allocation would go to the purchase of trails and open space lands. And principally that is in unincorporated Douglas County. So there are a portion for the municipalities and that has occurred in the past, both through a share back and through other funding opportunities. But the largest allocation here is for open space acquisitions in unincorporated Douglas County. Thank you.
Jennifer, appreciate that. So for those of you who are joining us on the phone, I just want to remind you, please press *3 on your phone pad in order to get in the queue and ask your question. Roger, do we have another question that came in online?
Absolutely. Here's a question that came in from Bob. He asks, what is the timeline and goals under the master plan to fund additional development of trails, etc. at Sandstone Ranch?
Dan, that sounds like one made for you.
In terms of future projects at Sandstone, we do have a master plan for Sandstone that's phased out, and every year we look at that. We do a capital improvement plan to assess additional projects that we identify throughout the years. So that's really what we're looking at. So we will follow the master plan that we have created for Sandstone for future trails out there.
Thank you, Dan. Roger, it looks like we have another online question.
I'm going to go to the phone, actually, Commissioner, and hear from Susan next. Susan, go ahead.
So I just wanted to speak about the tax and the 20 years. If you look at what happens to monies when it has to come out of general fund, and I do flexibility and trusting your leaders, but you look at the national parks, you look at some of our state parks, and a lot of their care and maintenance is underfunded because the money gets used for other things. I'm 100% in support of tax money, having it identified, recognizing the legacy aspects of this, as well as just the health of our entire county, having these kinds of things available to all people and having them well supported and well taken care of. So I'd like us to think in that long-term commitment phase of mind rather than whether or not I trust the County Board of Commissioners. I don't think that's a good separation of how we look at it. And I think the 20 years is fabulous, and I think the ongoing tax is fabulous.
Thank you, Susan. Roger, another online question?
This question comes in from Bill. Bill says the type of tax is almost the same as a user fee because it is a dedicated use. And even the people that don't use the parks benefit from the view, shed, and property values. Is that correct?
Yeah, maybe we'd like to hear from the committee. Jennifer, looks like you got the microphone.
Yeah, there are, our parks and open spaces here are public. They are open to the public, and that people come from all areas in the Front Range, particularly down to Douglas County Parks and Open Space, because we have such a great system here. And interestingly, it's a lot of those people that come from outside areas into Douglas County that when they're done recreating here will go out for, to shop, or they'll go out to restaurants, and they actually contribute through that money to our open space parks and trails program. So it's kind of a synergistic thing.
Jennifer, this is Jay Sage, I'll add. And beforehand, the Power Open Space, Kevin, working with people with disability and Dee with young kids at Spruce Mountain. This is interesting how we're hearing about the power of open space. So I've worked as an ambassador or volunteered as an ambassador at Sandstone Ranch. And you talk about economic advantages or disadvantages in a sense, but you see people hike and enjoy, and someone would get into a very expensive car and someone would get into a lower expensive car. But maybe the person with the more expensive car paid more of a tax as far as that sales tax on the car for funding it. But I can tell you what, it makes no difference as far as economic strata. People get out on the open space, whether they're walking their dog, riding their horse, riding their bike, or just sitting and meditating in the silence. It's a wonderful aspect. And at one point, economics becomes not a factor.
Well, thank you so much, Jay. One of the benefits of coming into the hearing room for these town halls is the ability to raise your hand and ask a question. I've got a question from a young lady back in the back. Go ahead and tell us your name, what part of the county you're from, and ask your question.
Okay, good. My name is Beth, and I live in Sedalia, and I'm from an avid horse community. I've both ridden most of the trails on the open spaces in Douglas County and elsewhere in the state, as well as hiked them on foot. And to me, there's no surprise that the open spaces contribute to the property values in our county, as well as us being one of the healthiest counties in the entire country. So I applaud you for this initiative. If I had been asked, I probably would have worded it to extend through my grandchildren's lives, because I think it is that important. But thank you.
Well, thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. Well, a good popular sentiment. Sir, go ahead. Tell us your name. Tell us what part of the county you're from.
Hi, I'm Lassen. I'm from Unincorporated Douglas County. First off, I applaud the commissioners and the folks who brought this proposal. I support open space in Douglas County. I also applaud the commissioners for being willing to put this on the ballot so that voters have a choice in the matter. I share concerns like the gentleman to my right mentioned with regards to the municipal share back. And my real question is, what is the oversight for the municipal share back? Who controls that? And what are the municipal entities, and either numbers or who they are, and are they municipal districts? Are they cities? And what kind of limits are placed on the funding that goes to them and how they spend this money in their communities? And the last question is, why aren't they funding it from their tax base? Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Just a reminder. Now, I do live in Castle Rock. I pay the tax too. So, whether I'm in Castle Rock or I'm up in Highlands Ranch or I'm over in Castle Pines. But that's actually an excellent question. I wonder if we can handle that. Let's talk about where we are at today. I wonder, Steve, if you can provide us a little bit of insight in terms of what oversight is present for municipal sharebacks today. And then once we hear from Steve and he gives us some of those facts, I'd like to turn back to Jennifer, Mickey, Jay, to have you guys talk about what this new proposal, how that kind of changes our current state. So Steve, speak to where we are now and how we use those funds today.
Thank you, Commissioner. In order to speak about the municipal share back portion, I am going to have to hand it over to the partners because from a park side, we don't participate in that. From a park side, what we do participate in is partnerships. And those partnerships, they're based in the fact that everybody in an unincorporated Douglas County, but also in all the municipalities, are citizens of Douglas County. So while we're making trail connections, a lot of things that we do fall outside of the municipal boundary. There are some projects that we are looking and planning down the horizon. There's in unincorporated Douglas County, there's a regional park coming forth called McCanta. And that's going to serve all users. So we look at the kind of our strategy, and we're trying to do the best we can for the citizens of Douglas County. It doesn't necessarily point towards anybody in a single municipality or not. Now, when it comes to the share back portion, I'm going to have to pass it over to my colleagues to the right.
And Jay, I wonder if you wouldn't mind taking that. You spent many years on COSAC. You've dealt with share back requests. I wonder if you can handle that for us, and then talk a little bit about the new proposal and how that would handle the share backs to municipalities.
Right. So in Parker, Civic Center Park, Discovery Park are funded by some of the share backs. In Castle Rock, Founders, Philip S. Miller, Festival Park, Butterfield Crossing. From 1995 to 2000, Castle Rock was funded 13.8 million. So there's a way to share back with the municipalities. What we've proposed now is a straight 20% share back. The share back currently is divided between the county and the municipalities, and the municipalities grow. We're concerned that there'd be less funding for open space. We found that capping it at 20% keeps the current municipalities whole, and then we'll bring in the two new municipalities, Castle Pines and Lone Tree. As far as oversight, staffs work together as far as the projects the counties will do. They go to in front of advisory boards, which are controlled, and a public meeting. And it's ultimately the commissioners make the decision if the share backs will be appropriated to the appropriate municipalities.
I would just add to that it applies to the 5 municipalities that are located wholly within Douglas County. So Castle Rock, Castle Pines, Lone Tree, Larkspur, and Parker would be eligible under our proposal.
Thank you. Roger, we have another call.
Let's hear from Aaron next. Aaron, go ahead.
Hi there. My question is, what is the status of Douglas County using eminent domain to take over the 1,000 acres in Daniels Park that's currently owned by Denver? Would that be part of this? And would any of this tax be used for any part of that, either purchase money or legal fees?
Probably one I should handle. Hey, we are very early in the process of talking to Denver about Daniels Park. We have heard from the mayor of Denver that, they're not interested in proceeding forward with it. It's still something we're looking at. It's something we're looking at to use condemnation powers. Of course, got to remember, this is the state of Colorado. A government cannot condemn a piece of property without paying a fair market value for it. So could this extension of the sales and use tax be used to pay for the acquisition? Well, of course, but it's going to go through many steps first. It would be probably a recommendation that we get from Parks and Open Space, our Parks Board specifically, and then of course it would come to the commissioners to take action on that. As Jennifer pointed out earlier, there is no authorization to immediately go into debt by passing this ballot initiative this November. So that would have to be a second question, and that would have to be something we'd finance, probably using revenue from the extension of the sales and use tax. I don't know, Commissioner Thomas, if you'd want to add a little bit more to that one.
I'll just add that I'm not interested in taking Daniels Park away from Denver. We get to use it already for free.
Well, Roger, with that, do we have an online question?
We do. This came in from Michael. He asks, what proportion of Douglas County is currently open space? And does the county have an overall strategic goal for the ultimate amount of open space? And is there a zoning specifically dedicated to open space?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that one. So in terms of what our goals are from open space, like I had mentioned before, through various efforts, we've been able to acquire about 64,000 acres of open space. In terms of big picture, what does that mean to the county? In terms of true open space, there is a zoning designation for open space. Out of all of that 64,000 acres, approximately 17,000 acres would be kind of designated as open space in terms of zoning, and zoning does have specific rights to it, and also the conservation easements is very similar to like a zoning that you would place on a property, so that does restrict uses on that property, on that land as well. In total, about 1/8 of the property, or 1/8 of Douglas County would be open space. We have identified other areas where open space would be necessary, and that would be to extend trails throughout the county.
Thank you, Dan. Roger, I think we have an online question.
We do. This one came from Jane. She asks, my understanding is that GOCO requires a local match of typically at least 20% for open space grants. If the open space sales tax does not exist, would Douglas County use general funds instead, or simply forego any more open space acquisitions?
Yeah, that's probably a question for us, Commissioner. Boy, that's a really great question, and I'm not 100% sure I know that answer. Would we have to divert from general fund, as actually Mr. Smith suggested, if we wish to continue to fund the maintenance on our parks, and if we wish to continue acquiring open space and preserving it? Yeah, we're going to have to dig into the general fund, and that'll lead towards interesting budget questions for Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Layden, and I, in terms of then what do we fund from the general fund now that we will cut, reduce, or completely forego in order to make these open space acquisitions. And then it just really puts the question there, because Steve, you come in at budget time every year to talk to us about what it takes to keep our parks in the state they're in now. That would have to be a pretty interesting conversation. So that's the answer. Absolutely not specific, but that is the situation we would be in.
Commissioner Teal, this is Jay Sage. I want to acknowledge the partnership we've had with GOCO, the lottery. The numbers are that they provided us with 25 grants, total of $23.4 million. The largest, they helped preserve Greenland Ranch, of $4.8 million. So just want to acknowledge that they've been a great funding partner, as well as many organizations, in helping us preserve open space, and hopefully they'll be a great funding partner with us in the future.
Yeah, and just to add a little perspective from my past position, when I was a member of the Castle Rock Town Council, the extension of the Plum Creek Trail south of Plum Creek Parkway all the way into the Crystal Valley Ranch neighborhood, and actually connecting all the way with Larkspur, actually half of that cost was funded by GOCO. And that was just in the town of Castle Rock. So obviously GOCO is a really valuable partner for not just the county, but for our local municipalities as well. Well, folks, Mickey's big hand, not you, Mickey, the big hand on the clock tells us that it is coming to the end of our hour together. So I'd just like to take a couple minutes to reflect on everything we've heard today. We have a citizens committee that has brought forward a very interesting proposal. It does make changes to the current way we use the open space sales tax. However, it doesn't raise it. So it's not going to be a new tax. It's not going to be a tax increase. The changes are merely in how it will be used. It is under consideration by your county commissioners right now. We are considering, and we're going through talking about the details to put it on the November ballot. So thank you all so much for coming in today. Thank you for joining us on the phone. Thank you for joining us online to participate in the conversation and let us know what you're thinking. You guys are the bosses here in Douglas County. We work for you. Also like to let you know, guys, you're going to be able to see this rebroadcast again. If you are on Comcast on Channel 8, Channel 8 is the new government access channel that we have up and running. And then, of course, for those of you who are not on Comcast, you can still go to YouTube and see so many meetings just like this one, and to find out and to see what your county government is doing. With that, Commissioner Thomas, take us home.
Thank you, George. You know, it's always interesting to see the people in the room and their interest level. So thank you for being here. We've got people from conservation groups we've worked with. Thank you for being here. People have been working on the open space projects for many years, and they've brought a lot of joy to a lot of people in this community. Pete, I'm just going to take a quick stab at your question. I've read studies over and over about just putting all the money in the general fund and letting elected officials spend it. And citizens are not willing to vote for a tax that just goes into the general fund. They're more willing to vote for a tax that has a dedicated use, so they know what their money will be spent for. And that is the reason I believe that when taxes are put on the ballot, they're clearly identified what they're going to be spent for, and they're limited to those. Because I don't think citizens should always trust their elected officials. And so that way, when they put the money in a bank account, they know that's how it's going to be spent. So that's my answer to your question. I am sorry, Pete, we've been friends for a long time. I'm honest. You know, I am willing to support this open space tax because I have seen the good things it does to our community. I think it's always the devil is in the details, and we need to understand what all those details are. I've already said that I think in this economic period, a 20-year tax is too long. Things change in 20 years. I contacted some people at the state, and they told me that when the state does a sunset, it's usually for 6 to 9 years when they do a sunset on a bill. So I think 10 years is a good amount. And if we don't like the way it's being used, it can be changed. We were able to get that money scraped up together for Sandstone because we didn't have a lot of handcuffs on how that money could be spent. And this particular proposal has lots of different handcuffs in it, and how the money must go here and must go here and must go here. And if we need a use for something here, we might not have the money to use it. And so that's why when I'm going through here, I'm looking at the details and seeing if it makes more sense for it to have less restrictions, less requirements on it, because then we can be more flexible, but you still know that it's going to be spent for parks, trails, and open space. I made a quick call to one of our employees the other day and said, so do we have numbers on uses? And they told me that there's about 3 million people that use our county parks every year. And there's about 500,000 people that use our open spaces every year. I thought that was really an interesting number. And I think that's something we need to consider as we're looking at that tax. If we want to make sure that the tax benefits the biggest number of people is at parks. So those are the kinds of things over the next month that I'm going to be researching, looking for. I want to hear from all of you about what you think about this tax as well. So thank you for everybody for being here tonight. This is an exciting opportunity for our future. Good night and God bless.
Thank you, commissioners. On behalf of Douglas County, thank you for joining us this evening. If we didn't get to your question tonight, we invite you to submit any questions on any topic you may have to douglas.co.us/citizen connect. We hope you will join us again for future town halls, and have a good evening.